Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. US brokered talks between Russia and Ukraine end in Geneva today with meaningful progress, but Zelenskyy says political differences still remain. UK authorities look into claims that Epstein's private jet flew in and out of UK airports even after his 2008 conviction. And UEFA appoints an inspector to investigate racism claims after Real Madrid's Champions League match against Benfica. A second day of US brokered talks between Russia and Ukraine have ended in Geneva today in a bid to end the war. US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff said there had been meaningful progress. However, hopes of a breakthrough remain low. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy told reporters there was progress on military aspects, but there are still differences on the political dimensions, including the issue of territory. Meanwhile, Russia's head of the delegation says talks were difficult, but businesslike. Take a listen.
The talks lasted for 2 days. We had very long discussions yesterday in various formats. Today, we talked about 2 hours. Talks were difficult, but businesslike. A new meeting will take place soon. That is all we wanted to say.
To discuss this and all of today's stories, I'm joined by correspondent Sarah Firth, who joins us from Washington, and Catalina Marchant de Abreu, Arabiya English presenter, who's in the studio right here next to me. Catalina and Sarah, great to have you on the show with me this evening. Catalina, let's go to you first, because obviously we just heard from the Russian delegation who were attending these talks in Geneva, the US brokered talks between Ukraine and Russia. It's the second day of these talks, and how did negotiations all pan out?
Well, Leigh-Ann, I think as you really well put it out, you said the chance of a breakthrough has been low, even though there have been breakthrough in other areas. However, talks reportedly ended abruptly this time around. So that's the general word that's actually being used to describe the mood of the talks. So that can't actually be good. So both Ukrainian and Russian delegations are actually describing the negotiations at this stage as difficult, with no major breakthroughs on core issues. Obviously, these are territorial concessions of the Donbass region. So the chief Russian negotiator also characterized the talks as tough but businesslike. So this might also be the Trump or the U.S. influence in the talks. But on the other hand, we are hearing a different version from the U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and the U.S. side, because they keep expressing optimism when it comes to the talks. I don't know if this is a negotiation tactic or a media tactic, but they always report it's been constructive. Now they're saying there's been meaningful progress. We'll get to that progress in just a minute. But he's calling these discussions productive, also crediting the Trump administration with putting both sides together. So this is meaningful progress after all. So we do have to credit them for that. So, however, meaningful depends how you look at it, because the deadlock does come to the Donbass region. It seems like a hard one to break. We know Zelenskyy is now accusing Trump of putting excessive unfair pressure on Ukraine on peace negotiations, while not putting the same pressure on Moscow. So he's saying it's not fair to publicly demand concessions from Ukraine. Concessions, of course, they're drawing the red line, rejecting any plan requiring the country to hand over the Donbass region or territorial concessions that Russia, they say, has failed to capture. So as we know, this is also a constitutional and domestic issue for Ukraine, because surrendering the region would be unconstitutional, and the surveys do show that about 75% of Ukrainians would oppose territorial concessions. So maybe this is not even possible at a political or domestic point of view for Ukraine. So talks concluded with diplomatic tensions. still ongoing.
Yeah, absolutely. And they concluded pretty quickly. I felt like they started
Abruptly
and ended, really.
is the word.
Sarah, I wanted to talk to you because Catalina mentioned something, and I sort of read between the lines when it came to the different readouts that we got from Ukraine and Russia. So they said that some movement was made on military issues, like the frontline location and also the ceasefire monitoring. And Zelenskyy seemed pretty convinced that the US could be involved in these security guarantees, and that's something we haven't heard before. There's been questions, will the US have troops on the ground, will they not? But as Catalina says, territory remains unresolved. So the big question is, okay, we've got forward movement when it comes to military, but territory we don't. Is Moscow and Kyiv just way too far apart at the moment?
Well, I mean, you look at what President Zelenskyy himself said. He said, our people will never, ever accept ceding territory. Emotionally, he said, people would never forgive it. Never. They will not forgive me. They will not forgive the world if we trade our blood for a false peace. Now, he is being very clear there that when it comes to this issue over potentially giving territorial concessions, particular the Donbass region, that is simply not something that the Ukrainian people will accept. And Leigh-Ann and Catalina, I remember being on the ground in the lead up to the 2022 invasion by Russia, being on some of these front lines with the Ukrainian soldiers. And remember, they had been fighting at that point for years, since 2014 when Russia first invaded. And you then had a freezing of these front lines. But that term, sort of frozen front lines, can sort of misrepresent a little bit what actually happens, because there was pretty constant back and forth of exchanges of fire between the sides. And the Ukrainian soldiers there, when you spoke to them about the possibility for diplomacy, would say, what would you do if your neighbor came into your house, said that they were going to take some of the territory, said that they were going to impose their rules? Would you allow that? And another thing that was repeatedly said to me by the Ukrainians up in some of those territories that were under threat from the Russian invasion, they were saying, look, this is our home. This is our children's homes. That's what we're fighting for. So the Russian side, their soldiers, they're fighting for territory, for territorial gains. For the Ukrainians, it is emotional. And you're seeing that emotional language coming from President Zelenskyy. Yes, the talks, it seemed, didn't really manage to bridge the gap very much. We know that when it comes to security guarantees, Ukraine has been very clear it will need the US to step up in a fairly major way to secure any security guarantee. Now, President Trump here in the US has been very clear in the past. He's not willing to consider US boots on the ground. There is a sense, though, in military circles here in Washington and among sources that I've spoken to, that realistically it would require some kind of serious and significant US oversight, and the threat of serious repercussions. Otherwise, what you could see happen is simply Russia do what it did in the past. And you heard President Zelenskyy also saying about Russia's tactics, because repeatedly, this is the third round of these talks, and you've seen Russia carrying out strikes even as these talks have gotten underway. And Zelenskyy has said, look, Russia, he said, is a slave to war. They greet the dawn of peace talks with missile strikes, proving they do not seek a finish line. They seek only a pause to sharpen their knives. And so that perception that these talks themselves are simply Russia looking to gain a bit of extra time to re-galvanize their forces, to continue this push, to continue their invasion. That is something that Ukrainians are very aware of. They're very wary of when it comes to discussing any future possible concessions or frozen front lines. They're fighting for their homes.
And it's so interesting because when we have a look at all of this, we can't forget Europe in the mix and the fact that Europe has been supporting Ukraine. They've been standing by Ukraine, but the US and Europe are also funding Ukraine. And this is where a lot of the argument comes in. How much funding can they still give Ukraine to continue this war as it goes into the 5-year period? But thank you so much for your thoughts on that, Catalina and Sarah. We're going to move on to another story now, and police in the UK are looking into private flights to and from London Stansted Airport following the release of the Epstein files. Former British Prime Minister Gordon Brown has called on UK authorities to urgently re-examine claims that young women were trafficked in and out of the country. Brown claims Epstein's jet marked 90 flights to or from UK airports, 15 of which are after the 2008 sex conviction of Jeffrey Epstein. So, Catalina, it feels like the Epstein files are something that doesn't quite go away. There's always new release of Epstein files and we get more information. Now we see 4 UK police forces looking into this. What information do we know?
Exactly, and I think we're going to keep looking into this. I think we're just digging the surface here because before there was a lot of conspiracy theories about what's going on, and now I think we're entering a second phase of the Epstein files where we are seeing some criminal investigations and convictions that we haven't seen before, which weren't Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. So what's happening specifically in the UK is that we know that 4 different police forces within UK are assessing information about these private flights to and from London Stansted Airport. So this is linked to the latest release of the Epstein files, where they reportedly include detailed flight logs. So here's the part that really raised eyebrows, which is what you mentioned. There were 90 flights to and from UK airports, and 15 of those that happened after Jeffrey Epstein's conviction, sex offense conviction in 2008. So that's pretty odd, right, Leigh-Ann? So he claims that the files show graphic detail how Epstein was flying girls in from Latvia, Lithuania, and Russia to Stansted, UK, where women were transferred from one Epstein flight to another, adding that they would not need British visas. So this seems it's still under investigation, but what do we know if this was a real transition point of sex trafficking women from one point to another, right? So this is what's under investigation right now. But what they're investigating, who's on the flights, what were they for, and was there any criminal conviction actually taking place on UK soil?
Yeah, and as you say, the investigation in the early stages, but they are now looking into it in the UK. And Sarah, this is something I find quite fascinating at the moment when it comes to these Epstein files. They've obviously been released in the US, but more Brits seem to be implicating it, and the British legal system seems to be taking it really seriously. We've seen Ghislaine Maxwell, she's British. Peter Mandelson lose his position as the US ambassador. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor lose his prince titles, and now we see 4 police forces looking into this, and of course that's because of the former Prime Minister Gordon Brown called on them to look into these allegations about these private flights to and from the UK. But across the Atlantic, what's happening there? Are people facing the same kind of wrath?
Well, Leigh-Ann, I mean, we always say, don't we, when we're reporting this story at the moment, and we've discussed all the twists and turns over the last couple of months, including the fallout from this latest drop, which the Department of Justice here says is the last of the Epstein files. So it's more than 3 million documents that were put online. But yeah, as to the consequences here, so we always say being named in the Epstein files does not mean that there is wrongdoing, right? But there is no escaping the fact that the President of the United States currently, Donald Trump, his name is mentioned thousands of times in the latest drop of documents alone. Now, investigations, journalists, we're all still combing through the details of these documents, and that's where you're getting this sort of constant update of information as it emerges. The files themselves, when you go and look at them online, they're not in any particular order, so it's very difficult to track down various bits and correspondences, flight logs emerging, passenger manifests that appear to be partially missing names. It's very, very difficult to sort of wade through that huge amount of information and actually try and figure out what has happened. But what is very clear is that in both sides of the Atlantic and indeed around the world, there was a lot of support for Jeffrey Epstein, facilitation of his movements, and that there were really powerful names in politics, in business, royalty who were involved, who knew Jeffrey Epstein, and more importantly, who it's now been revealed with this latest drop of documents, had misled the public in the past when they said, we've cut ties with Jeffrey Epstein after, for example, his 2008 conviction. And there's been a lot of evidence now in these documents that shows that that simply wasn't the case, that those relationships went on longer. One of those names is Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary here in the United States. He'd gone on a podcast, he'd said that he'd had no further contact with Jeffrey Epstein after a certain date. And in this latest drop of files, it's emerged that he did visit Epstein's Island with his wife. He's spoken about that. He's admitted that they had a lunch. Again, important to state at this point that that in itself does not mean wrongdoing, but people are pointing to the discrepancy between the public image that he portrayed of having cut ties and the statements that he made, and then the reality and what the facts are actually showing in these documents. Now, yes, figures like Howard Lutnick, for the time being, the White House is standing firm behind him, but the anger is growing here in the United States, not least, guys, from the survivors themselves. They stood multiple times on the steps of the Capitol. They did it this time again after the latest drop. And what they've said is, look, the Department of Justice, they've been fighting them to get these files released. They finally, they thought, got the DOJ to comply. And yet when you go through those documents, there's some pages that are completely blacked out. They are saying, the survivors, the women and girls who suffered at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein, who allege abuse at the hands of other powerful people, are saying that there are still names that have not been made public. There are still powerful names that are being protected by those redactions, and they want those names released. And they say without it, there simply can't be justice. Justice hasn't been done yet.
And what's interesting is you talk about them wanting those redacted files out. And Catalina, we always speak about the Epstein files and the conspiracy it creates without bringing out those redacted names. So it seems to be one of these stories that keeps on rolling on and on
giving.
the more the files are released.
Exactly. And I think there's another step here on the files release. There's going to be the Zorro Ranch, right? There's going to be an investigation into this. And it's a new truth commission. This is actually something I learned today about this property of Jeffrey Epstein, because this is a bipartisan investigation to investigate what happened here, because lots of the survivors actually claim, and I think these are some of the biggest claims made yet, that they were trafficked to the ranch, sexually abused there, and in some counts they said there were secret bodies buried on this property. So they're going to be investigating this property that now I think it's owned by someone else, and he said that there's complete transparency to review the grounds, etc. But it just shows what an octopus tentacle situation this is and the ramifications. And I think that until we don't get all the names of everyone released in the files and complete transparency, this issue, as Donald Trump said, we're not going to move on.
Absolutely, and it's so clear that it goes much deeper than people had ever perceived it to have done before. But thank you so much, Sarah and Catalina, for your thoughts. Let's move on to another story. And Philippine Vice-President Sara Duterte says she will run for president in 2028. She announced her bid on Wednesday in the wake of being impeached last year. Chris Gilbert reports.
Sara Duterte is aiming for the Philippines' top office.
Mga kababayan,
my countrymen, let us bring back the courage and devotion for God, for the nation, and for every family and Filipino people. I am Sara Duterte, and I am running as the next president of the Philippines.
The current vice president is embroiled in a bitter feud with current leader Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Now, she's running for his job. She's accusing him of corruption, saying he failed to keep promises during the short-lived alliance that saw them storm to a landslide victory in the 2022 election. They've been caught in a political brawl since, after the vice president was denied favored cabinet portfolios. Since the Philippines only allows one 6-year term and Marcos can't run again, Duterte is now targeting the office for herself. She's the daughter of former President Rodrigo Duterte, who's currently detained in The Hague on murder charges linked to his regime's bloody and brutal war on drugs. Her announcement comes days before her father begins a pre-trial hearing at the International Criminal Court over crimes against humanity.
I offer my life, my strength, and my future in the service of our nation.
She was impeached last year on charges including corruption, plotting to assassinate President Marcos, involvement in extrajudicial killings, and incitement to insurrection and public disorder. The Supreme Court threw out that case over procedural issues, but it may be a bumpy road ahead. Analysts expect the announcement may make the current administration even more hostile towards her. But she has a stranglehold over her home province and is already a household name. Because of this, she's expected to be a frontrunner when the Philippines goes to the polls again in 2 years. Chris Gilbert, Arabiya English.
Sara, let's start with you. 2 years to the election, as a reporter Chris Gilbert told us. But what do we know about Sara Duterte?
Well, look, Sara Duterte, Leigh-Ann, is from this political dynasty, as you heard reported there. So her father was the former president, Roberto Duterte. And Sara herself, when she announced that she was running for president in the 2028 election, so a couple of years away, she made note of the fact that she had really taken account of that political history, if you like, and thought about what it meant, what her responsibility was. And she says she feels that she does have a responsibility to run. She's come out against the current president. She said that you've seen this widening gap between them. That's come about because there have been corruption charges that were brought against Sara Duterte. You've also seen her face a lot of criticism for a possible sedition speech. It's alleged that she'd said that she'd hired someone who would possibly kill the president if she herself was ever assassinated. So there's a whole load of political drama behind this. And the way it's worked out in the Philippines, because of these connections with the family, is that you really have not just political rivals, you have these political families battling it out for control. Now, she's 47 years old. She said in that speech that she asks for forgiveness for backing President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. at the last election. She said he lied during his campaign season, making promises that he didn't keep. She is currently, it's thought, according to polls, the front runner. But guys, that isn't always a great thing in the Philippines. We've heard some experts say early leaders are not guaranteed, and sometimes it's seen as sort of having your head above the parapet and really potentially facing pretty fierce resistance from the those that are still in power ahead of time. So there is a long way to go, but the race is sort of looking like it's starting to take shape. And Sara Duterte taking this battle that she's had with the current president and moving it towards the ballot box.
I must say something. It sounds like a Netflix plot, doesn't it? All the drama that's happened, because, of course, Sara Duterte's father, Rodrigo Duterte, is in The Hague at the moment, so there's lots of information about all of this happening. But actually, Catalina, like Sara said, 2 years is far away, but Sarah's going for it. The other Sara, she's putting her ring in the hat, yeah, Sara in the Philippines. But what's the sentiment on the ground about the elections and about Sara herself?
So on the ground, just as it is in politics, as Sara also said, it's these two political families and dynasties that are battling out. So we're seeing this in politics and in the ground. So obviously in the ground, we're seeing mixed reactions. So first, what you have her supporters, especially in Mindanao, among the people who actually are fans and like her father's style of leadership. They're excited about this presidential bid. So they see her as a strong, decisive woman that it's able to bring back stability and tackle corruption. So this announcement has actually energized her core supporters in the country, especially in this area of the Philippines. And among those who actually feel nostalgic for this tough, called populist style that her father had, and that he became known for. So early surveys actually say that her political party endorsement suggests she's starting with a strong name recognition that we know. So her base believes that she offers a contrast to what the current administration is offering. So this is one side of the picture, right? There's always another one. There's the significant picture that comes with skepticism that comes from her opposition. So on the other hand, critics remain skeptical. Obviously, she has a lot of political troubles going on. She has corruption, political controversies. So people are openly questioning her motives. Why is she running so early? We have 2 years to go. Is this in order to possibly distract from these ongoing political controversies? So this is what most of her opposition is questioning and being skeptical about. So then there's also a middle group, who is the undecided group that is seeing these two families battle it out, and they're still undecided. I also wanted to mention that the critics also mainly come from student groups, two youth movements, and also the opposition party, of course. So the sentiment, there's excitement from her supporter base, suspicion from opponents.
It's so fascinating, isn't it? 2 years out, and there's so much happening in the Philippines. But you know what I always find? It's the youth groups that always start the change in a country. We saw in Bangladesh and many other countries. So let's see how it plays out in the Philippines. I'm sure we'll be talking about that again soon. But stay right there. We're going to move on to another story. And UEFA has appointed an ethics and disciplinary inspector after allegations over racism directed at Real Madrid forward Vinicius Jr. The Champions League match against Benfica was stopped for 11 minutes after Vinicius claimed a racist slur had been made towards him. The incident supposedly took place after Vinicius celebrated his goal in front of rival fans. In a post-match interview, Benfica boss Jose Mourinho was asked if Vinicius incited the crowd. Here's what he had to say.
In the world of football and what happens on the pitch, I always try to maintain a certain balance. I don't want to say that Vinicius is a liar and Prestiani is an incredible kid. I didn't mean that, and I wouldn't say that. Alvaro has opted for a different perspective. Kylian has opted for a different perspective. I don't want to get involved in that. The only thing I'm saying is that this happens in so many stadiums with the same problem every time. So there really is something wrong. I just said to Vinicius, you scored an extraordinary goal, something out of this world. So why are you celebrating like that?
There we are. So we just heard from Jose Mourinho after that match. Of course, he's the Benfica manager. But what's the latest on the incident? Because this has really been dominating global headlines today.
Exactly, Leigh-Ann. So the latest also, if we want a little summary for those who don't know, after Vinicius scored, he scored the only goal during this match. He celebrated, and after celebrating, he was shown a yellow card for excessive celebration. So this is where the entire confrontation began, where Gianluca Prestianini approached Vinicius. He pulls his shirt up, and he says something. He pulls the shirt up to the mouth, says something, which players nearby and Vinicius interpret as a racist slur, as has happened many times with him before. Vinicius runs to the referee to report it, and then the match is paused for about 10 minutes to verify the situation. So the latest on the ground is that there's going to be an investigation that's going to be launched into this. For example, there's also testimonies, including Kylian Mbappé, who's backed this account, saying that he did hear the slur as well. So investigation is going to be thrown. They do have a match coming up on Wednesday, so I don't know if there's going to be any meaningful results before then, but for now they're going to be looking into this and seeing what can happen. If they find that one or the other, if Gianluca was in the wrong and he also committed this racial slur, he can be suspended, etc. While he did come out and say, and his team also defended him, saying that he did not do this. So two sides of the story, we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sarah, we did hear from Benfica. They did obviously bring out a statement, and they did say Prestiani also denies the allegations against him. And UEFA has, of course, launched an investigation. But Benfica says it fully supports Prestiani and claims there is a defamation case against him, and argues the distance makes it unlikely Madrid players could have heard what they claim. So we're hearing both sides of the story, but what are the implications? Because Sarah, for years and years as a journalist, I have covered racism in sport. I remember interviewing Kick It Out 12 years ago about the very same thing, and I just don't know if it's improving.
No, and I mean, it's crazy, isn't it, Leigh-Ann? We were all speaking about this a little bit earlier, just the fact that you've got these people in such positions of public perception. They make so much money. They've got these huge opportunities, and yet you're still seeing incidents like this mar the game. It's been described by some football commentators as shameful and just lowering the tone of football as a whole. The allegations are very serious. The statements refusing what's been alleged, very serious and very strong. So look, UEFA has said they have appointed an ethics and discrimination group to investigate this. The possibilities for repercussions if it's found that that racist incident did happen, well, you could be looking at a 10-match ban. But I think it's also really interesting. You were saying there about, reporting this for over a decade at least, this sort of focus around trying to stamp out and eradicate racism in football. And they have got an anti-racism protocol that's now in place. And there's some question marks over whether UEFA are using that to its full capacity. They paused this game when it happened after the allegation was made for some 10 minutes. And I've seen some people saying, look, if you were in any other workplace and you faced an incident of racism, even if you're alleging it, you felt that that happened to you, you wouldn't be expected to carry on your work day after reporting that. And the football pitch is essentially their workspace where this is taking place. So it's happening in a very, very public way. You're right that there is a huge renewed focus on trying to stop these types of incidents taking place, a much more strict and serious line, rightly so, taken on these racist incidents, and overshadowing the game itself in a pretty major way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was speaking to a former Chelsea footballer earlier, Mickey Abreu, and we were talking about this because Kick It Out has been the big campaign to try and get racism out of football, especially in the UK. And what Mickey was saying to me, it's been really difficult because you cannot control what the fans say, but this has been player on player, which is highly unusual. And as they say, that's the upsetting thing. And I think what a lot of sports people are looking at, saying these guys are heroes to people, to children, and it's just these allegations once again on the football pitch.
I think that also the players do have to set the example for the fans. I don't think it's just racist slurs. I think we have the famous, in the World Cup, the famous example of Zinedine Zidane, who goes and he punches with the head the other player. I think that's also another example, for example, of violence. So I don't think it's just racism. There's also been violence, player on player. And you do see them in the pitch where they don't fully respect each other and they can do racist slurs, or sometimes they push one, they push the other. So I think this is part of the soccer culture, unfortunately, so you can't expect the fans to behave any better. So I think, if anything, there has to be a full revamp when it comes to any of this if we do want to show any type of respect towards the players and the fans and the whole sport itself. And if they want to keep this as part of the culture, then, well, so be it.
And they do call football the most beautiful game in the world.
Fuchibo.
Yeah, it doesn't be seeming to be too beautiful at the moment. Thank you so much, Sarah and Catalina, for your thoughts there. Now it's that time of the show where Catalina and Sarah have chosen two of their quirkiest stories of the day. And I am going to start with Catalina because you like the story and I like the story. And the whole reason is because everyone wants to know the answer to the main question: are aliens real?
Obama said they were, so they have to be. I'm going to believe it. But we're going to take a listen to what he said. This was on the Brian Tyler Cohen podcast. So let's take a listen to Obama saying.
Are aliens real?
They're real, but I haven't seen them, and they're not being kept in, what is it?
Area 51?
Area 51. There's no underground facility unless there's this enormous conspiracy and they hid it from the President of the United States.
What was the first question you wanted answered when you became president?
Where are the aliens?
Where are the aliens?
I absolutely watched that and I thought it was brilliant. Catalina, but he actually caused such a stir. He had to come and give a statement after, didn't he?
He did, because, I mean, this is coming from a former president. So obviously people are going to believe what he's saying sometimes. But there was a lot of international media publishing these headlines saying Obama said aliens are real. So he did have to come out. He came out the next day, I think it was, Sunday evening. He clarified on Instagram. He said that what happened is that he was trying to stick to the spirit of the interview, of the speed round, he says. So, you know, answering quickly, question with a question. So it got so much attention that he did have to clarify. But what he did actually clarify, that what came from the president, is that he says statistically the universe is so massive that it's likely that a life beyond human life does exist somewhere out there. He does says that the distances between stars are so huge that the chances of aliens visiting Earth are extremely low. That we know of. We don't know what they're hiding.
Yeah.
But also importantly, he's seen no evidence during his presidency that aliens are real. So disappointing a lot of us.
I know, that's so disappointing. Sarah, I don't know what you think, because I really do believe
pro-alien.
aliens are real. I've said that many times before. And we hear about Area 51.
I don't know about aliens, but the sort of alternate universe reality. I mean, with some of the stuff that's going on these days, I kind of feel like there's definitely a joke in there about the current politicians here in America and aliens amongst us, but I won't.
Let's not go there.
Let's not go there.
Let's not go there.
But I do find it absolutely fascinating, all of the alien stories and, of course, the conspiracies, because
Area 51.
not just America, Sarah, but mainly in America, you know, there's always so many conspiracies about aliens and Area 51 and what the government has hid and what people have seen, which I find fascinating. And Sarah, I haven't actually looked at yours, but apparently the internet is buzzing about this. I don't know what it's buzzing about, but tell me what it's buzzing about.
The internet is buzzing, guys. And Leigh-Ann, you're in for a treat, because what it's buzzing about is a baby monkey called Punch. Okay, so this is a story that started off a bit sad. The baby monkey was born in 2025 and his mother rejected him. And so the zoo, it's a zoo in Japan where he lived.
Oh, there it is.
Yes, we've got the images. They used a stuffed orangutan. Oh my gosh, the video is amazing. And he's used that, and basically that has supported him. You know, in the wild, if the mother rejects the young, that would have meant certain death, but he's been kept alive by the zoo, and that's, you know, his emotional support orangutan. The pictures that were shared by the zoo initially was showing Punch was having trouble being bullied by the other monkeys as well. And someone had commented saying, I'm not in an emotionally stable enough place in my life to be witnessing Punch being bullied by the other monkeys. And so the fact that the video is being shared of Punch with his friends is just, I think, captured everyone's hearts, and everyone's sort of rooting for little Punch there. We all need an emotional support orangutan stuffy, I think.
I actually saw those headlines when I was scrolling through TikTok, where I saw abandoned monkey bullying. I'm like, skip. I could not. I'm glad it has a happy ending, but you know, the headlines were so awful at first I couldn't take a look at the video, but I'm glad it has a happy ending.
Oh, and
he has his emotional support pet. Yeah.
Does he not look so happy?
I'll adopt him. I'll adopt him.
I'll tell you what, monkeys are naughty. Oh my gosh, if you
Yes.
adopt that monkey.
Marcel.
No, Marcel was well behaved. I tell you what, monkeys are absolutely mischievous little things. I'm telling you something. I never forget this time we used to go on holiday to Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe all the time for Christmas, and my mum would always bake a big Christmas cake. And one year the monkeys came in and ate it.
Yeah.
She never forgave them.
And in Thailand, they're huge thieves, right? They're known for stealing sunglasses and
everything.
iPhones. Yeah.
I know. Well,
I love them. They can have all my phones, all my sunglasses, take them.
Until you want to scroll through TikTok and look at their cute videos, they might not like the fact they've got your phone. But Sarah and Catalina, I want to say a big thank you to our guest today, correspondent Sara Firth, who was joining us all the way from Washington, and Catalina Marchant de Abreu is right here in the studio next to me. And that's all from us on W News Extra. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Of course, follow us on X. GNT will be coming up next. Goodbye and thank you.